Hello, everyone. Hello, hi. How you doing? You all right? Good, great, excellent, great to hear. Good week, brilliant. Um, Welcome to Something About Rhyme, episode 3 of the second series. That's how we're doing it because it's a guest every episode. Yeah, that's how we're doing it now. So get used to it, Buckaroo. And it's funny to sort of like build up this sort of tension whilst introducing someone who's already on camera because there's sort of like there's no tension. You know someone's coming, but who could? Well, they're right there. That's only if you're listening to if you're watching the video version. If you have got the audio only, then the name is probably with Craft D. So it's given away regardless. But either way, my guest today is Craft D.
Yo,
It's Craft D. He's the mastermind behind the Bristol Poetry Festival, and also from Raise the Bar, which is a sort of poetry, spoken word night that you run in Bristol and sometimes London. Is that right?
yeah, it's been all over the shop, man. So, but yeah, the big ones are in Bristol.
He's also a battle rapper, and has been for, I want to say, 5 years, around about.
It is about 5 years exactly.
About 5
yeah,
years.
First one.
So you came into the game with the likes of who? Who was sort of like with you when you were coming in?
I battled your good friend in my tryout.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
of course.
There was
Wait, that was your tryout?
It was the era, wasn't it? That was the tryout battle for both of us.
That's mad.
We'd never battled before. Well, I freestyled off camera, all this cliche stuff, but never done on a filmed to go on YouTube battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a while, but it's been good.
And but you were sort of like more in the poetry world before and since, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I keep fairly quiet. Like I go into battle rap to battle. And some people see me as like this poet guy who came from spoken word and then moved into battle rap and learned to rap. And I rapped way before I did like poetry or spoken word or that kind of stuff.
So, really? So it happened that way around. You were rapping, and then that sort of led into doing spoken word as a more sort of like,
in a performative sense, yes, because like obviously when I was a kid, I was writing a lot of poems. When I was in school, I was writing poems. But I was rapping out loud to people, spitting before I was performing or saying out loud poems. So,
right.
Like that is my background, and my interest in battle rap came from rap.
Okay.
Then I saw what the poets do, but it's just funny because I think a lot of people who listen to this probably know you from battle rap and that, and will probably, if they know me, they'll know me from battle rap. But yeah, poetry, rap, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
So would you say you're more of a spoken word artist now, or more of a rapper now, or do you not sort of like want to define them like that, or what?
No, I'd say rapper just because I don't like the term spoken word artist. It doesn't really resonate with me. It doesn't apply to me. For me, I'm a poet and I'm a rapper, and anything I'm performing or doing or writing will in some way fit into one of those two things. And even rap probably for me fits into poetry as well, and writing and rhyming and constructing punchlines or metaphors, whatever it is. So spoken word kind of, it just has connotations with like slam, competitive, it very emotionally driven, very narrative driven, like to get a score from an audience. And associate that. So if you say spoken word, people go, "Oh, you're that kind of poet." Where I probably got some things that do that sort of thing, but because I like to think I write to a range of styles. If for me, just things like poet and rapper, or even just writer, I know that you often say, you're just a writer, and I think that encompasses a lot of what you do. Because you rap and you battle, you do sketch comedy and stand up, all these things, but it's all stuff you write and then
cool.
Yeah, that's it. That's the boxes. That's the boxes I'm happy with.
Sick. So how do you find, like, seeing as you do sort of like you have both elements open to you, like do you find that you write particularly different in one style than the other? If you're writing poetry, specifically, let's say, Is that something where you have to like enter into a different mindset, and how does it affect the rhymes? Because like when we look at like traditional poetry, obviously it's set in quite exacto rhymes like cat and mat and fat and hat, like
Yes.
traditionally, but obviously that's moved completely with sort of like the new wave of poetry. I'd say in the last, I want to say like 30 years, there feels like there's been a lot more looseness around of like half rhymes and things like that. I'm sure it predates that, but in terms of what's popular.
But even that, there's not a lot of like patterning of vowel sounds or multisyllabic rhyming. Like it's a few people doing that kind of thing in the poetry world. Holly McNiche is an example of someone who's like really viral, really famous from her poetry, and she rhymes pretty much every line end rhymes, but she is very loose with assonance and half rhymes. There are some poets who it's going to be much more sort of on the dot. That is, it's an exact kind of perfect, maybe perfect, right? Yeah. I don't like that word, but it.
No, I know, it sort of like undermines the multi, doesn't it? Multi's the perfect rhyme. Fuck off.
And I think the assonance is more important than the I rhyme. That's just me. I think it's more widely applicable, more widely used than I rhyme is, and perhaps that's something to do with class and where poetry's come from, and being a very court and upper middle class tradition at the start. You know, I mean, a few centuries later, it wasn't as much. In the English language, that is, obviously poetry's far and wide.
I wonder if it's as well, if it's something to do with the fact that it is I rhymes. Like, you know, poetry, I guess historically is maybe less intended to be heard and more often read, like in anthologies and stuff. And so when you're doing that, I suppose it's better to live by this objective rule of rhyming one thing perfectly with one thing, so that there's no questioning around it, rather than going into multisyllabics and where there's more of a subjective nature to it.
Yeah, and there were less people doing it back then as well. There were less people who were poets, who were kind of allowed to be publicly or outwardly a poet in a role. Even a lot of the poets hundreds of years ago, they were financed. They had some kind of, you know, backing so that they could do that. Benefactor, like a wealthy benefactor.
Patrons and that.
It wasn't really something everyone did, and I think there was probably had been less written at a point when that was the norm. Just rhyming things. It was all quite exciting. It fell out of favor really in the 1800s already, but then 1900s, modernist, postmodern poetry, like people don't like rhyme. And it's because of this idea of the exhaustion of rhyme, that the rhymes have all been used. A classic example is, you know, the sort of natural or pastoral poets, or now I want to say romantic poets in general, who are writing about nature and gardens and mowers and trees. And, you know, trees rhymes with breeze. And that's been used so many times in that poetry, and they're like, well, you can't rhyme it with much else, and it works perfectly because you're talking about nature and
exactly. It's relevant.
Comes to a point where people were like, I'm bored of these rhymes that I'm hearing constantly. If it's a romantic poem, I'm hearing these rhymes. And that's what's so exciting about vowel sound rhyme and multisyllabics, because it is in the last few decades that people have really started experimenting with them. And if you look back through some of the archives of poetry, there were a few people every now and then using multisyllabics. It was called Hudibrastic rhyming, and it was seen as something a bit silly, a bit comical. Hypotenuse and I've got a lot of news.
I remember. Is that Oscar Wilde?
It might. Oh God, I cannot remember who said that.
Or Byron, maybe.
Yeah, it's someone from a while ago. It's like an older written poet, but that wasn't taken seriously, and if it was given any sort of critique or attention, it was because it was stupid. It was ridiculous to rhyme multiple syllables.
This is what's so interesting about it, is that it does seem like it was treated as a frivolity. And when you look back, I think I mentioned before Tom Lehrer, who I think he was most famous for his song, which was the Table of Elements, where he was just going through the periodic table. He's like, and he's obviously like a comic singer from, I think, like the 40s maybe. And he's got a comic song which is called Poisoning Pigeons in the Park. and he rhymes. And although they can try and hide, I'll get them with my cyanide.
Yeah.
And it's like he knows he's rhyming try and hide with cyanide.
Oh, and this is the thing, it's conscious and almost not at the same time, because they're not doing it consistently, but the end rhyme is often still perfect.
Yeah.
Try, hide, and then it's like just adding that little bit extra in, but it's still not really. It's not
like he sat there like us going, oh, what's a good multi for cyanide? He's not thinking on that level. He's just probably thinking, oh, cyanide and try and hide. Like it just pops in. He's like, oh, that sounds funny because it's got like a whimsical, bouncy element to it.
Oh, and by the way,
limericks.
Rhyming has such an important place in comedy and just making people 100%. Laugh. And that is really important. And rhymes that sound a bit silly. Again, this is something you more than me, but we've used in battle rap, because you say something in a certain way as the setup to the punchline that if you're trying to make people laugh, you want to make the rhyme quite funny.
Yeah, definitely.
And a bit playful in a way. So that's always been a crucial part of rhyme, and shouldn't be frowned upon and be like, oh, that was silly rhyming that they were doing that, because it is so effective and so clever. It's just getting to a punchline in a different way. Whereas the kind of snobbery and all this around writing and poetry, which is snobbery towards not only comedic people sometimes, and this is the same in battle rap, with some certain demographics, but also like children's writers. Writing for kids is arguably the hardest writing to do. They are the harshest critic. They're not going to pretend they like something. It's got to be so efficiently and well worded in such a different way. But sometimes, children's writers will not be up for awards and not be looked at in that sort of level.
Yeah.
And I think the same with comedy sometimes. So using rhyme for comedic purposes, it has a big history in poetry, in just orators in general.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it's like I was saying earlier about the like the limericks as well. It's like one of the only places that you find things like Birmingham and Confirmingham, and like they're not technically like multis in the same way. They're like double or triple rhymes, but they're still you find them there more often than you find them anywhere else. And again, it's that sort of whimsical sort of appeal to it. And yet limerick is probably seen as like one of the lower sort of like echelons of poetry from what I know. This is the thing.
But then in terms of achieving what the poetic form is setting out to do, make people laugh, it's one of the more consistent and effective forms of poetry. So again, it's interesting what the goalposts are. Yes, and who are the gatekeepers, who are the custodians of those parameters. They're people that want it to be a highbrow intellectual thing. And again, that whole purpose is probably to make it accessible to an elite of people who they consider an elite, and to make sure not too many other people get involved in it, so it stays like that. If you look 100 years back, that's probably more what was going on. Whereas now it's a much more democratic form. Poetry and rap has come not directly from poetry, it's come from so many different things, but particularly Harlem Renaissance sort of forms in music and things like that. But it's definitely much more democratic, and that's because people have taken it into their own hands and gone, we're changing the forms, we're changing how we're using it. That's been accepted by the public. So
well, that's such an interesting, like, it's a really interesting thing that you were saying earlier about like people getting fed up of rhymes being so predictable in traditional poetry, and then we're going to, as a response to that, we're going to like get rid of rhyme and it doesn't have to rhyme anymore. It's such an interesting response that one sort of team of people did that, and one team of people sort of went, well, let's just make rhyme way more complicated and like complex and technical with multisyllabics. Which I'm closing that because there's a massive fucking bee. That is the fucking biggest bee I've ever seen. Jesus Christ, like a dog. What the fuck? How is it even sticking to the wall? How is that walking up a wall? It's like a fucking rock.
Just open the window. The bees will do their thing. Bees will find their way back.
Yeah. Oh, mate. He is an absolute... No, he's on the outside now. I just got him before he came in.
Right.
Fucking hell. He probably could lift up the window, though. He's a fucking beast.
All the bees are thriving, man.
I want you to see him. I want to see if you can Is it too bright?
You got the angle now. If you can. Oh yeah, I see it.
He's a fucking animal,
It's something there. It's a bit shadowy, but yeah.
mate. It's probably best you don't see the whole thing. He turned to stone. Mental. Anyway, that's going to be a weird bit for the people not watching the video. Now, it's really interesting to see how two groups of people could like respond to that differently. And but the interesting thing about it is that it seems odd that it took so long to get here. Like poetry is ancient; it's literally ancient, and I suppose it wasn't always. You know, I don't know what the when you read translations of things like epic poetry and stuff, it's obviously most of the time it's not rhyming, but I guess there was probably elements of rhymes in the original version.
It may have been rhyming in the original language.
It's just mad to me that it took, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of years to get to a point where we go, you know, that we're consistently using things like multisyllabics in the last 30. Obviously it's been used before, but like not in this kind of like, not as much and often as we see it
because patterning in general is such an ancient tradition, isn't it? Spotting patterns and using them and playing with them. And that's what I think. But I think we're at a sort of watershed moment right now. We're living through it. I think I think your book being the first of its sort of kind that I'm aware of.
This little number,
that one,
Advanced Rhyming Dictionary, that you can buy yourself at t.com.
Poets.
Shop. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's playing a role in a sort of bigger narrative that's. I think the academic institutions are almost decades behind, that they will be studying and very closely the use of advanced rhyming. That will be a huge thing that they do. But they're just, and again, we look at classism and we look at racism. Where have these forms come from? Who pioneered them? Who are the pioneering voices? Working class, non-white people. And I think that when we talk about academic institutions,
100%,
institutional bias, if it had come from another place, and it's the same reason you get criticism for, you know, knives and drugs in hip hop.
Yeah,
we don't get it in rock and metal, which are all the songs are talking about that. Yeah, it's all about violence and drugs. So it's very interesting that I think rhyme has been critiqued in a way that if it was your T.S. Eliot's and these guys had come and go, we're doing this new pattern of multisyllabics, it's the best thing.
Yeah.
Now would be like, yeah, that was the best thing.
Yeah, they'd be like, yeah, talking about it by now, and it would definitely be in schools. It's so interesting. And yeah, I've often thought that about like the difference between how people see things like violence in, let's say, a Scorsese film compared to violence in a rap, which is about like a gangster life culture, you know, a gangster way of life. They're both doing the same thing. They're both like people talking about a certain experience. And when actors are seen as someone who have lived through it and then come out, it's like, oh, amazing that they're able to bring that to life. But if a rapper is someone who's lived through that kind of thing and is now making art about it, then it's like, well, you know, should they be glorifying it? And it's like, well, pick a side. You can't have both.
We're talking about democratic nature of rhyming, and in the same token, I can't separate it from these socio-economic factors. Like you say, I mean, you could apply it to anything. The media recently were talking about footballers money and them not, they should give all their money away, and it's like to charity. I'm not saying they shouldn't be charitable. I do believe they should be, but it's kind of this, how dare you be from the ends, like just talented at something and have all this money. You know, they're on a pay scheme. They're taxed heavily. They have about a 15-year span career in general. So they make a lot of money, but you know, a white middle class banker who's been born into that, who's going to make billions for a longer time than 15 years, isn't given that same criticism. So we have to look at criticism's fine, critique's fine. I think as artists, and we always need to be critiqued and to push ourselves, but who's being critiqued and why, or whose ability or talent isn't being pushed and why? Because like you say, it just seems so strange that hip hop and the traditions that this new form of rhyme have come from just don't get that looking from the
Yeah.
establishment and the academies. But it is changing. It is
It
changing now.
is definitely changing. There are so many initiatives to sort of like use hip hop and rap as like forms of therapy for young kids. Like not necessarily like in a sort of intensive way, but just as like a sort of way of getting your emotions, you know, a bit working and sort of like getting your words out and saying things that you wouldn't normally say through rap. And there are so many initiatives through schools and stuff. Even I've done a couple with Rob Bradley, the guy formerly known as Jack Flash.
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah,
he was doing some work around here and he took some time off, and I went and covered for him for a few weeks. And like even in those kind of situations, you've got loads of kids who are just interested in doing this like after school activity to get better at rap and get like their ideas across. And I think that it does help a lot of them with things like, in the same way that any kind of performance can, like helps them with confidence, but also the act of writing in a way that they're in charge of and they're familiar with. It's still creative writing, and it's still completely as effective and useful, and also like as a grading mechanism to see where these kids are at in terms of their language and vocabulary and things like that, because they'll use words in those raps that they don't use in everyday language, you know, because they're thinking more about it. And even maybe if they were writing stories, they wouldn't use it in the same way because they're not forced by the limitation of rhyme to sort of like think of what else they could use and things.
Yeah.
So I definitely think you're right. It is changing. And I think it's a matter of time before schools start looking into like rap as a way of sort of like being a teaching tool and a mechanism and stuff a bit more permanently. I think the only thing that puts a lot of teachers off is the idea of like, oh, they're swearing in it, and so we can't do it with the kids and stuff like that. But
yeah, it's and that is going to be a barrier for a little while still. I think again, like with a lot of my work is going into institutions or schools and things, and just doing some workshops, doing something with rap and poetry. And you know, I've gotten work through directly through the Poetry Society, where there's been teachers or someone running a syllabus gone, we want someone who does this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who does we're teaching poetry, we're doing a module on performance poetry, we're talking about rap and Tupac, but you know, we want someone who knows about that and does that.
Yeah.
So actively are looking for other ways to engage and bring more modern culture into the syllabus to link it, and then to get the kids to be more motivated to want to dissect the poetry because they can relate to it, they can do it themselves, the artists like are doing it. So yeah, I think the point you mentioned about prejudice, you know, in lyrics, things like that, there's swearing and prejudice and things like that happening, and it's a difficult one. I feel like the same with battle rap. Like, you could use battle rap in so many places, especially with disadvantaged young people.
Yeah.
Amazing tool, but outwardly, and again, I this isn't my opinion. I think battle rap's got its context. Some people cross the lines, other people don't, and it's like stand-up comedy. It's part of the culture.
Yeah.
But to an outside eye, sexism, homophobia, it's never ever gonna fly. It's never gonna be accepted. But it's just changing people's perceptions and exposing them to a lot of different types of that art form. But yeah, some places you go to, they don't care if you swear. So just again, it depends where.
And so yeah, that's an interesting one about the about battle rap being used as a sort of thing for teaching and stuff. I think with Don't Flop, we did something before where we went to a school and we had half the students like for renewable energy and half the students against renewable energy and like using traditional things. And so it was like them having like a battle again, like using all the sort of like the pros and cons as their sort of like angles against the other person. It was really interesting actually to see them use it and take it and run with it. And they did say that the kids sort of like retained a lot of the information, because this is what I'm always saying to you, is that about like rhyme being used as a tool for memory, I think is just one of the biggest applications there is for it. I think it's amazing.
100%.
And yeah, a lot of the kids remembered loads of stuff that they came up with afterwards. So that was really cool. You've done a bit of research into finding multis in other areas, haven't you, other than rap? Like I think you found some Disney ones and some pop songs and stuff.
I mean, this is like, for people listening who don't know, myself and Adam, we message each other a lot just with random little things that we've noticed, and that's been happening for years.
Yeah.
And we just kind of found this nerdy thing in common quite early on. And not even because the people we met through are all battlers or rappers and people interested in rhyme and multisyllabic specifically, but kind of this added thing of like, no, I kind of want to take it a step further. Like I'm noticing them everywhere, even when I'm not in my creative process. I'm just walking down the street and I'm going, you know, there's literally things like you'll see a sign that says freshly made every day.
Yeah, classic.
You know, in Bristol, there's in Clifton, there's a road that has a restaurant, and it's not a perfect rhyme, but it's enough. It's like there's a restaurant and a pub next to each other that are Bristol Fringe and Giggling Squid.
Yeah.
It's those little things of little things, and you know, I do it things subconsciously and sometimes, but then stuff like the ones I put on Twitter that are just the pairs of footballers. I love football, so obviously I watch a lot of it, so I'm gonna always hear the commentators and the names of players rhyme, and I'm gonna start. So then I've got a list of 20, 25 pairs, and probably loads more I could think of if I sat down and put time in. Or like the rhyming, was it my rhyming six-a-side team, where it's like Mohamed Salah, Wan-Bissaka, Mariappa, and there's a whole bunch of players, and there was more as well. There was like about 10 of them. Just that same rhyme scheme. But noticing things and putting rhymes together, and this is what I like about the rhyming dictionary, and I think it's kind of one form of rhyming. It's kind of like its own subculture in itself, which is rhyme for the sake of rhyme. And I think that's a very interesting and very new thing, because and like we've had this discussion before, because I think talking about critique and things should be critiqued.
Yeah.
Probably, I'll say one of the critiques, probably the only critique I've seen of the book from people on Twitter or whatever is, oh, this gives people answers. Like it's like for people who can't rhyme. But I'm like, it's one element. It's one element of creativity. And if you're good at it, it's a very important one, and it guides the narrative and the flow and everything. But there's so many things to make something good in a context, and to link it and to make it good.
Yeah, 100%.
You can't just pick up that book and have an 8-bar really badly written, with just really neat end bits. The end it would be silly, and people would notice, and they'd know.
It would be transparent, because there are elements to writing that you know, are nothing to do with the end rhyme. There are so many things to do with, like, you know, shaving down syllables to get it exactly on a line or like on a beat, and things like, just like you get a certain maturity in the way that you write generally. Like when you've been writing for a long time, like the way that I used to write everything up until, you know, excluding the rhyme, is completely different to now, because I think so much more about it. And so there's all those kind of elements that you wouldn't be able to, you know, mimic just by having the rhyme. And you just hear these sort of like clumpy rhymes just put on the end of each one. You'd be like, why is this element all right, but that element...
And with a lack of narrative, with a lack of leading you somewhere, it's like, I always say narrative, people who can use rhyme into a narrative context are my favorite rhymers. I always think of like, for the battle rap heads, you know, Immaculate.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, now stuck in the glitch where sound doesn't exist. That whole scheme, which is just amazing. But to have the connective word now, like you do say so and then the rhyme. Able to put even the bits like now into the
it's like a very conversational thing. It's that kind of element where it sounds like it just happens to rhyme by chance. That's the best kind of like, I think Kruger's another king of that.
Kruger is fantastic. And that's so. I don't know what was actually the point I was arcing back to. Anyway, we'll get to it. But yeah, that idea. No, the idea that there are other elements to how you implement the rhyme, and how you Yeah, how you
Yeah,
sort of use it. I actually can't fully remember what I was going to say.
well, I think you're definitely onto something. So one of the things I always say, I've said it like a million times on this podcast alone, is just that like rhyme is one of those things that's designed to both be noticed and not noticed at the same time. Like there's kind of a sweet spot with it. You don't want it to stand out as the only interesting thing about your writing. You want it to just complement and, you know, just like be a nice touch onto what you're just saying. Like what you're saying is key. It's just there's just these nice things that you've sort of done with it, like any kind of writing device when you're writing a speech or anything.
Fully.
You know, metaphors, similes, all those things aren't the actual beef of it. They're just the frills around the edge that make it nicer to listen to.
And that's
but also you want them noticeable in that they're good. And so you go, you know, on second listen, you're like, oh shit, that's amazing. He rhymed that with that. But at the same time, you don't want it to be the only thing that they notice.
It's someone like, again, I think battle rap's good place to go because there's so many great rhymers there. Some of the best rhymers probably
100%.
of all time are living battle rappers right now. And you look someone like Luna C, who like is known for his comedy.
Yeah.
People who quote him are quoting the jokes, but I think there's so many things, even myself, I don't always notice that he's rhyming in the middle until I listen 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Always think of like, it just ends of his punchlines will be like, when she takes a shit, it ends up like the name of this event.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to go takes a shit, it ends up like it's not noticeable unless you kind of, but you notice it and you don't notice it. Because flowing, I'm really enjoying how this is flowing. And a lot of people who come into battle rap through yourself, O'Shea, Luna C, because they're laughing at the jokes. There's a lot of other people in battle rap making similar jokes about similar topics that aren't popular, and it is because of the technique and the rhyming. I'm convinced. Obviously, there's other things, you're wording it in a certain way, the comedic time and the punchlines, but just ending a single syllable mum joke isn't as funny as the way Luna C does it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's like you say, it is subconscious. And I've spoken to Rowan about this before as well. Like, even though, like, when you come into rap at all, or even if you've been listening to rap for ages, you don't necessarily go, oh, right, that rapper is doing a multisyllabic rhyme. That's why it sounds good.
Yeah.
But you subconsciously realize that there is something that is interesting. And it sounds pretty and it sounds bouncy and stuff like that, you know, and you don't even know what it is. It just sounds good. And that's why those people rise to the top. That's why Luna C is one of the best of all time, because he mixes that sort of a lot of juvenile, silly wordplay and, you know, genuinely good, but also silly with exceptional rhymes that are very long and bouncy and, you know, varied. But he's got his own style with it. And so he's rhyming these long strings of like funny ideas together, and it just sounds pleasant and you don't know why, but you just know it's good.
That's exactly like that. That's exactly how I feel about it. And like you mentioned before, the subconscious thing. And I think this is where the link was to how we got here, because we were talking about, you know, rhyme for the sake of rhyme. What we're going to talk about is how rhyme is used contextually as a tool. As a tool, as a rap, one of the things in your toolbox, even if it's your biggest tool and the one you use the most, it is part of the toolbox. Whereas this idea of what I like to call a standalone rhyme, like something that is just, you could have, I don't know, Avril Lavigne, a celebrity, Avril Lavigne.
Yeah.
I could say, I'm rapping it mean, and that does rhyme. In fact, it rhymes really well. In the scheme, you've got, I'm rapping it mean. That's the thing. But if I was to say, you probably think of one's quicker than me now.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve is actually the one I was about to say, funnily enough. Adam and Eve, Avril Lavigne. You say to someone, Adam and Eve, they know what you're talking about.
Exactly, it's contextless.
Yeah, and this is the difference. And it's not better or worse. I think it's almost a subgenre or subculture of the tree, which is rhyming words. That you and others, but particularly you with the book and all these things, have kind of honed in on to a level that even people who kind of enjoyed that a bit, you kind of taken it to this new level where you can go put a tweet out and say, who can just rhyme this word? Like, I'm not asking to write a piece of art or make a creative writing or just something that rhymes with it. And then a skillful writer could take all those rhymes and maybe make something out of it if they wanted to. But
yeah, 100%.
It's a small part. It's the big part of something smaller. A
Yeah.
small part of something bigger, should I say? Obviously, a big part's not smaller. What am I talking about? Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the book, and it's just something enjoyable. And I think you could come into it through rap or poetry, through battling. You could literally find it on Twitter randomly and never have seen any of those things, and learn how to do it. And it's
some people have just randomly found me on Twitter and seen that I do the daily rhyme challenge, and they've just been like, they start with a couple of ones that don't necessarily multi in the right way, and then often someone will, generally quite helpfully now, like people are less like, oh, you don't fucking get it, which they used to be, and now they're more like, oh, actually, if you do this, 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 and this, then like that's what you're doing here, and they go, oh, okay, and then after a few more failed attempts, they start to get it and finesse it. And
one of the really satisfying things, I have some friends who are like exceptional writers, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Start coming to me with a multi, and it's not a multi.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not one. And they go, no, it is. And I go, no, let me sort of. And sometimes, even though they're just outstandingly creative geniuses, they haven't done this thing before and it's new, and being able to just have a conversation and explain it, and then them get one and then start doing it well, that is so satisfying.
Mate,
with a few of my friends.
However, the worst thing in the world is when you explain it to someone, they get one, and then you go, yes, that's it. Yeah, Adam and Eve and Avril Lavigne. And then they go, yeah, okay, sit in a tree. And you go, no, you just had it. You just had it. Where did you put it?
Some of the explanations are really bad as well. Like if you Google, or there's been books about rhyme that I've read, and someone's started talking about multisyllabics, and they're not talking about multisyllabics at all. And like that's what I mean. Something about rhyme, episode 1, another plug. Tune in for this one. You know, that was just a description of how to do it. Yeah. And I think I haven't heard many, if any, just descriptions of what it is, the process, how. What it means technically, what it means on paper, not just what it means out loud, to achieve that technical effect that we call multisyllabic rhyming. And it's something I'm writing this chapter. Well, I'm supposed to be writing this chapter. I am writing it. It's got to be done soon, actually. About there's a book about the spoken word handbook that's going to come out, published by Routledge, about UK sort of poetry and performance landscape, and I'm doing a chapter about rhyme. You know, I've got only 6,000 words. I'm going to talk about where modern rappers and spoken word artists have taken vowel and multisyllabic rhyming. And I know that at the start of this chapter, and I've done it even about a year ago, I wrote it, is a description of what a multisyllabic is, how it's used, and ways to spell out on the page to suggest stresses. Because even the way people suggest stresses sometimes is off-putting and doesn't make sense. Or I feel like there's better ways of even numbering the syllables is more useful than sometimes capitalizing or making them italics.
Yeah.
Really sure. One has to rhyme with one in the corresponding phrase.
I think
more people get it, they get it.
The a good image I always thought, which I actually didn't put into the book because we just emboldened the stress ones, but what I thought would be good is to put them as columns. So you literally just put a line on either side that goes from the top to the bottom, and you put add in the first one, in the second one, and in the third one, and then Eve in the fourth one.
Yeah.
And then you just you can literally line them up and say, when these are all matched up within these columns. So it's there's no way to get around the idea that has to rhyme with that, and these ones can be unstressed and stuff.
And the good thing about a visual or kind of graph or table like that is you can then drip feed things in. So you can start with one, and then you could halfway through the table, the title can change to say, oh, this one's now a stress syllable. In the middle column is now stressed. And then you see the difference between, there's examples we've said before, between handling the bag and Madeleine McCann, where I'm in the middle one.
This is the thing I was going to ask you next. Is and I think it would be a good thing to ask almost everyone who comes on, who knows about multis. It's where are the rules that we differ on?
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, when I've written about multis in my book, or when I did the first episode of this and I said this is what a multisyllabic is, what I should be saying, and what a lot of the time I am saying, is these are my rules for what a multisyllabic is. Like, there are certain rules that are kind of the same no matter where you go. Like, you know, it must have more than one syllable, for example, is always going to be a rule. And like, you know, must rhyme like with the assonance is always going to be a rule. But then for some people, it must rhyme exactly with the assonance as well. So instead of like, you know, for some people, you know, ashtray and fag break wouldn't be acceptable because it's a and ache, you know.
I'd argue they're doing a different thing to multisyllabic, which is it's an asinine art form, I suppose. It's something different. We've kind of taken that and moved it on.
I think most of the time that's the case, but I know some people who have reached out and said like they didn't like the ones that I put on a list because the endings sounds were different. They got what a multisyllabic was, and they got that it could have like 3 syllables in a row, but they didn't like that it didn't close on a perfect rhyme.
I'd argue you'd have to, the idea of assonance rhymes in general, you have to accept as part of multisyllabics. Individual circumstances of how that's applied, you can disagree with and say a classic one is extensions of vowel sounds, long vowel sounds.
Right.
Noun is one syllable, but it's a long vowel sound.
Yeah.
Pout is a very short vowel sound. So noun and pout, I'd rhyme those things. It depends. Yeah. Sometimes if it was at the end of the rhyme and it was a bit, it just threw the rhyme off too much, I wouldn't rhyme it together. Whereas if it was the first or one of the middle syllables that the rhyme stresses, I might use that. But again, that stuff like that is interpretation. The length of a vowel sound, how it throws you off. I know you don't like the L sounds. We've had a lot of questions about it. You don't like the you think the L sounds, particularly at the end of a word, should rhyme with another L sound when it's one
basically,
L, not when it's 2 L's, when it's like a quick when it's the and again that's extended vowel. I think that's why you dislike it.
Exactly.
It doesn't rhyme enough.
It's like whole and go for me. Just don't rhyme. And I can finesse them to make them rhyme, like, you know, the whole day, go away, or whatever like that. But when I hear other people do it, I can acknowledge that it sounds absolutely fine in their accent. It's just like that's a completely, or not even accent. Do you know what I mean? It's not even about accent. It's just voice. It's more like it's more individual than accent, because people with my accent say things differently. It's just like an individual voice. It's like the difference between either and either. It's like there is no, you know, it's just how you do it on the day sometimes. Scone and scone. I don't have a specific way. I just say it how I think on that time. Yeah,
no one has just like the one way of saying that. Like everyone has different things that they actually kind of go to.
So some of the ways we differ, I remember there was a big one a little while ago when we were rhyming. I think you challenged me, and neither of us got one really, but you got one in your accent. It was Rebecca Long Bailey, and we were just doing Deda Don Dady, and you said FS180, which is a skateboarding move, right?
Right.
And then I was like, oh yeah, it's good. It's just a shame about that one. FS180 Rebecca Long Bailey, and you were like, what do you mean? And this is all through text, obviously, so we can't hear what we're saying, and you're like, what do you mean? That's fine.
180,
and I was like,
180.
No, it's 180 and Long Bailey, they're different. And you were like that, and then it just turned out that we never knew about each other, that you say one like that and I say one like
they're so close, man.
I know, you can barely hear
one. I probably use them interchangeably, and again before that it was such a shock to me, because I was like, what, there's another way of saying, even though I probably use both interchangeably, I'd normally say 180
and then we put it out on Twitter, because I was just like, look, I'm not having this. I was like, you're, and then it was like 60-40.
It was 60-40, albeit in your favor, but it was very, like, it was near.
I was shocked, because I know that gets used like that, like, again, Midlands and above, I think of it being 100, like that. But in the South, I didn't think it was a thing. And I was asking specifically, in the South of England, do you say one or one? And it was 60-40, which is really surprising.
It's funny, because like I see that as quite a formal way of saying it. Like, and again, my accent's so stupidly hybrid. of Southwest London, Italian, all the different influences that are around me growing up. So the way I talk is probably a bit
mad,
inconsistent. And I think that's probably like, I feel like that's a well-spoken way to say it. One.
So interesting.
There's one go-to, you know what I mean? Like, they don't. I can't imagine the Queen going one.
Yeah, one. One is not amused, but it's really interesting. Yeah, I was having this conversation with Theo on the last one, and there's loads of things that we say differently. But another one that we come up against with each other is the ing thing. We were talking about this just before we started recording, about how I say, like, if I say single ladies, then it's rhyming with, you know, infiltrate me or whatever. Like the in is always in. It's always in. And it's always like, you know, Bishop, Stacey or whatever.
So I agree with, 90% of the time I'm with you there.
Yeah.
But there are situations where I would rhyme, and I'd say in general, the in sound, the ing, can be used and is used as it or e.
Yeah.
2 of the 5 vowels, they're 2 different vowels.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, one is, I was at a restaurant or pub or something with a friend who knew enough about, you know, rhymes so that we can have a little conversation about it, and it was they bought an order. I was like, oh, it's mushy peas and onion rings.
Right.
And I was like, that rhymed.
Yeah.
From the court, sort of like, no, that doesn't rhyme because you said e and ing. But I was like,
yeah,
the way they said it rhymed.
Right.
Onion rings, like it. The ing, they didn't go ring.
Yeah.
And it just, for me, that rhymed, but I wouldn't then say about, I wouldn't use P and ring as a rhyme.
Yeah, because it's like the more you have. Eminem uses, I've just been looking it up, and I knew Eminem used it in some way. And he says in his latest album, I think, I've been larding lately. I'm unacama dating. So like lately and comma dating is a rhyme there, and when he says it, it's absolutely fine. You know, there's no alarm bells going. Oh, he didn't rhyme that. It's obviously just in that voice. But it's interesting because this is what I was saying before as well. Like it's a whole other idea. Like for me, the ing and the e, when it comes to hearing it being said, you know, if you rhymed it in a thing, then I'd be fine with it, and I'd just sort of passively accept and move on. But it wouldn't even occur to me to rhyme those 2 things. Yeah. So like it's so interesting. That's what I find so interesting, is that there is basically a whole nother avenue for you there that I don't have. But then there will be one that I do have that you don't have as well.
There'll be plenty of them. And this is, again, I think such an important point about which you're quite liberal with. You know, you're not gatekeepery about, look, I'm making this book and these things rhyme and your things don't, if they're not, like you're not like that at all.
Yeah.
Because it's rhyme is so wide, and depending on context and accent and just intonation, how you speak, your pitch of voice, it can change for every single person. And for me, one of the skills of rhyme is manipulation of rhyme.
100%.
It's how you take things, you pluck things out of the air that you hear, and you contort them, and you make them into something. And it's what makes Eminem the absolute number 1 best at times,
right,
and crap at other times. When he does it well, no one does it better.
Yeah.
He's almost the innovator of the whole idea of, I'm going to take 50 things that nearly rhyme and make them rhyme.
Yeah.
And do it so well and be like, God, this is what creative writing is. It's manipulating the English language and contorting it to put it out in another way.
Yeah.
To people. And that's the same with metaphor, imagery, assonance, and sibilance, all these things that you say. I'm going to take words that people already are aware of, and I'm going to order them and pattern them in a way that's really amazing, and it's going to make them feel or think something.
Yeah.
So you can do that with rhyme. And I often like taking rhymes and performing them again, depending on it might be rap, might be poetry, performing them in a way that does manipulate them outside of a way that I might not use in natural speech rhythms in conversation. For me, that's really important. So the idea of perfection of rhyme and the way it's used badly and people using it differently, being some kind of antithetical ideas, I think they're part of the same process, and they're part of what makes it a fantastic and exciting skill. I think listening to rhymes in the moment that I haven't heard before, and then not knowing what's coming, and there's something very exciting about that. And sometimes, like you say, it's because I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have thought to do that. And sometimes it's like, that sounds really forced. You're doing it, and you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell someone's doing it in a forced way. But that's why I use the example of Eminem, because for me, he sometimes does silly, forced rhymes that he hasn't edited enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes he does it perfectly. Master manipulator of vowel sounds, you know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There was another one that we kind of differ on as well. We were going to say something about plurals and like the s at the end of things.
This is
that one that you don't like using things? So for example, if we were to rhyme like actually, well, let me get out the
I can think of examples of this, because
go on.
Conversation something like so again, this is one of the things I want to talk about. We often set each other challenges like, I've got a name of somebody and I want you to think of multis, or specifically also names of people. And I think that's a very, very advanced thing to be able to do. I think once you've like, again, not in an arrogant way, it's just when you've put in your thousands of hours that you need to kind of get in, you can start doing that. Whereas at the start, you're like, I just want to get things that rhyme and rhyme really well. And then you start going, okay, how many films that are rhymes can I get to rhyme together? You know, Hunger Games and Flushed Away and Runaway and Lucky Break and Judgment Day.
Yeah. Bleeze has got like a whole notebook full of these. I need to show you one day.
Like that for me, like that's so rewarding to have, like the footballer stuff. So like one of the name ones I was going to say was like, I have a whole list of names. I won't bore you with all of them, but like two of them are Nick Cannon and Kim Mathers. So Nick Cannon, Kim Mathers. For me, that saying that it rhymes, even though one's a plural. And there's instances in other rhymes I see in your challenges where you have to make the word a plural for it to rhyme, even though the original setup was a single, was a singular.
This is interesting because sometimes I'm okay with a plural coming in, and I don't mind at all. And obviously in practice, a lot of these things it doesn't matter. Like Nick Cannon and Kim Mathers in practice, you know, put into employed and, you know, in context and everything with a rhythm behind it is absolutely fine. I wouldn't question it. But it's more like when it's on the page, it's like when I'm looking at it under the cold light of day. So like for Kim Mathers, I would be okay with like, so shit happens, for example, is absolutely fine with Kim Mathers, but I still wouldn't have them. Shit happens to Kim Mathers. It sounds absolutely fine, but I wouldn't have them next to each other because I've got a very specific idea of like Kim Mathers is like it at or like a soft sound. So so for example, what have I got for that? I've got
and that is the level you're working at with the book, and that's cool to say, oh, that's a good rhyme, but in the context of the book and the exact assonance and vowel I'm using, it doesn't work.
So yeah, for that rhyme scheme, I've got cliffhanger, Mick Jagger, kidnapper, skin cancer, fish batter, pink panther, pig's bladder, and then at the end I have Ritz crackers, and that is plural because I know that, you know, it's usually a plural thing, but I don't mind the s on the end as long as it's got that sound before it, and it could technically be singular if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I've got that list that you were saying. I've got Tim Allen, Chris Tarrant, imbalanced. So like there's still Tarrant, but then balanced. So it's got a slightly different, but it's still without it, imbalance.
Or sometimes like parts, participle, whatever it is. It's just a different type.
shit happens, Nick Cannon, in action, and a king's ransom. So like there's
Yeah.
different kinds of sounds, but they're all basically the same. And this is another thing that I said before, is like I want them to be different, because I don't want the same old sounds over and over again. It's like an Asian, when you get like information, you don't want like instigation and all those other Asians.
But this is what it is. It's
you want
like
variance.
Tim Allen. You know, I'd if I was saying out loud, I'd rhyme that with fridge magnets.
Right.
I'd be able to do that because it's plural, but it at
yeah.
That's what I'm looking at. That's what people are hearing.
Yeah, and again, in practice,
yeah,
that'd be absolutely fine. And I get it's hard, isn't it? It's just these rules that we put on ourselves and that you get used to, and then you can't think outside of them.
It was a key distinction you made. These are the rules I'm playing with.
Yeah.
This is almost the subgenre I'm working in.
Yeah.
But there are other ways of doing this. There are other rules. You know, some people are completely loose with the last syllable.
Yeah.
For me, the last syllable is still the most important.
Same.
The most important. You can't just. Again, I'm trying to think of. Maybe I'll go fridge magnets. Some people go like the it at bit would be fine, and then the last bit would be, because it's, and I get why they've done it, because it technically is an unstressed syllable.
Yeah, exactly.
The last syllable is, and this is a key thing people get wrong with explaining multisyllabics. The stressed syllables are the ones that must rhyme.
Yeah.
If the last syllable is unstressed, it has to rhyme.
Still has to rhyme. And it's basically like a sort of, it's like a halfway. It's a half stressed, really. And you have to round up, almost like for the 50% that it isn't.
Yeah.
You still have to round up to what it is. So yeah, like Big Daddy or Prince Harry for Kim Mathers, you might think like, oh, well, that's it, and then the other one is whatever. But like, you have to, or like, you still have to pay credence, because that's the last thing you hear. This is what I was saying in one of the episodes, I think, as well. It's like, if you have a 2-syllable rhyme, and it's not even a multi, it's like table, and you rhyme it with like, it's much better to rhyme that with puddle than it is to rhyme it with Hayley. Table and Hayley. Actually, is it? I don't know. But like, I think it is anyway. Like the last sound you hear is more important than the ones that come before it in terms of a rhyme being exact and clean. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting distinction. And this, I was talking with Theo about it. One of the reasons why it's such a difficult thing to grasp is because you have to literally forget everything you know about, or like 99% of the stuff that you know about rhyme has to be kind of rejigged. And you go, it's not this exact thing. It's not perfection. It is fun. And then that sounds like you're making sacrifices. That makes it sound like you're going, you don't worry about it. Just as long as it sounds near enough, that's fine. But really what you're going is, it's much more complex. It's much more difficult to get right.
Yeah.
But within that constraint, there is looseness, and there is fun to be had with it. And
it's human nature in general. Like, it is, we're humans with egos and with things that we've normalized. So if you tell somebody to change something radically, even if it's something like how they perceive rhyme, something like that, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't fucking matter, it still can be a hard thing to maybe reassess.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a fun process. I think when you have fun with it, even if you're writing for very serious goals and very like material that is serious, has a lot of gravitas, and you're like, oh, this is important, you still want to kind of enjoy that process of thinking of
definitely
the rhymes and the wording and the playfulness and how it sounds as you're writing it, and that you got to enjoy it, I think. Well,
there's nothing more satisfying,
nerdy as we are about it, you know?
There's nothing more satisfying than clocking a rhyme that you that like takes you back a bit, that you go, oh fuck me, like that is nice, you know. Now it doesn't even happen that often anymore, because you get used to getting good ones, but now and then, you know, you'll just get, you go, oh my Lord. Like I loved a Noisy Neighbor and Toilet Paper.
Yeah.
And then there was I was watching Thor. I think I even brought this up on here, but I was watching Thor, the film, and there's an American drink which is called the Boilermaker. And I just heard it and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I had to pause it. I'm like, oh, that's so nice.
And because the oil and those kind of sounds are quite limited in general, rhyme. So when you hear it all together. Yeah.
When you hear one in the wild and you're like, oh shit, that goes with this. What the fuck? Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
and like you say, that we've had this discussion before about and this really exists in the idea of standalone rhymes and what you what you're doing. Look, things that have no right to be connected.
Yeah.
And
What's your business here?
The one you bring up, the controversial one, is Jimmy Savile and Disney Channel.
Oh yeah.
Like, you publish that book, like Disney could sue you for that one. How dare
just for
you
the fact that they rhyme? Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't belong together, and I get that a lot. I'm like, and that's it. A name of a footballer and a name of a monarch. Like, that for me, that's really exciting. It just fills me with joy.
And even more, it's sometimes like, I don't know whether it's more exciting when you're like, why are these two completely at odds things rhyming? Or what, like, one of my favorite ones is Henry I and Edward III. Like, they're two monarchs who do rhyme together. And there's no reason, apart from the way that words are constructed, like first and third maybe have like a similar sort of thing. But like, there's no reason that rhymes. There's no importance behind it. There's nothing to read into. It's not like etymologically there's nothing there. They're just names that happen to rhyme and titles that happen to rhyme with each other.
Sometimes on a fucking spiritual level or some shit like that. Like, I genuinely, like, in the universe, there's these rhyming entities which I don't control, I don't own, I don't have any control over sometimes, and there's these historical events so many decades ago, and that, like, the event, what it's called and what happened and some of the features, I can perfectly rhyme them together, and I'm like, that it only would have taken a little bit of something different for that to not have been possible.
Mate, I had one
like a weird,
I had one when I was writing one for the monarchs, weirdly enough, actually, and it was like it was about Henry II falling out with Thomas Becket, and it said like I was working on a scheme. I started with a rhyme and then moved on, rather than start from the bottom and work back, which I rarely do, but I think I had something going, and it was like Henry II and Becket are now enemies, it seems, and their friendship is deceased. And then I went, when was this? And it was 1163. So it's like their friendship is deceased around 1163. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, again, a decade out. And that's
similar ones to that, but I think I'm a bit more stubborn about sharing stuff than you. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use these things. I thought, whereas, like, and again, because I think that's such a great thing, that because you're writing for this context and making these books, you can just be like, here's all my rhymes. I'm going to put them in a book, so I'm going to tell you them now. It's not like, it's a weird thing. But again, I think what you were talking about is this, again, I don't know, sometimes it's my ego as a creative and it's just as a human that I'm like, it's just my ability that's putting these things together, or that it is like, no, there's some kind of cosmic thing that's like, these rhymes are out there. These historical events happened in this way, and I found the rhyme. I didn't think of it. In whatever way you look at it, I guess, and whatever sort of zone I'm in, sometimes I'll be like, that's like a gift. Surely other people have noticed that, and sometimes I'm like, oh no, I've definitely like constructed that very consciously and thought about the wording to make Eminem into some kind of verb, to Eminem it into existence. To make it rhyme, which doesn't rhyme, maybe.
That's an interesting distinction as well, because like I when it's doing rhyme for the sake of rhyme, and I'm making lists with Jamie and Charlie and Frankie most of the times, like the little crew we work in, like when we're doing that is using, like we were saying earlier, contextless ideas that you don't need to be explained. So we're dusting the prints. We're being archaeologists.
Right.
They already exist, and we're just getting through the dirt and going, oh, here's another one, but like in your head. So you're like, you've got this amazingly huge amount of words and collections and rhymes and memories that everyone has, and we're just sort of like going inside that and looking around for things like a sort of massive tomb. Whereas when you're coming up with things and you're writing in a sort of more creative way, that's when you're actually, you're at the museum putting these bones together, and you're sort of coming up with more things that are like, now I'm saying this is a sentence that I'm constructing out of like bits and bobs rather than find them fully made.
Well, that's it. And then is there a distinction then with when used in the context of creative writing, where there is ownership. And I think an example of like, there are certain rhymes you don't touch because you know you've heard it, and someone else, like the atomic bomb designer Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. I mean, that's Bender's. You'd think of that as that's Bender's rhyme.
If I heard someone say that, I'd go, that is I'd say that's ripped off. You've clearly,
But even that's interesting because even maybe before Bender said it, I'd heard it. Not that exactly, because I heard Loki in a track say Oppenheimer and bomb designer, but he didn't say Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, the atomic bomb. So he used a bit of it, and that's what I think. Like Bender really found, and the way that scheme continues, if you watch the battle, he really found something and created something there that you'd say that, and there's a lot of examples of that for me in rhyming. And Loki's got a lot of him in himself. He's one that I've heard in the early days when I was listening to rap. And again, we're talking about putting things into context. Was something like there was a bomb scare. They asked me the what, where's, and who, why's. It's not fair. Many Muslims have blonde hair and blue eyes. Like if someone said, for me, it is perfectly efficient, right? A lot of battlers have this gift for this, a lot of the best battlers. But if someone said what, where, and who, why, blonde hair and blue eyes, I'd say you can't say that.
Yeah, exactly. It's been, So, and yet, if you rhyme battle rap with hacky sack, which has probably been rhymed 1,000 times, you're not going to pick someone up on it. You might think, oh, that's not that an original rhyme, but you're not going to be like, no, come on, that was Billy Bob Johnson in 2004 and WRCs. Because it's just like there's nothing selective about it. There's nothing that like holds it.
That's how you use it.
Yeah, which is really
brilliantly. Have you made a brilliant point or joke or metaphor? With that rhyme as the tool.
It's a really interesting thing. The ownership of rhymes is a big question that I have over my own. I don't know whether I think it is a thing. Like, and like you say, I how I would act is different to what I actually think the official line should be. Like, I would hear someone say atomic bomb designer Robert Oppenheimer and go, no, that's Bender's, you've clearly taken that. But I don't know also at the same time if there is any ownership of rhyme at all when it gets to the wider sort of area. Like, if someone rhymes something like, crafty and I don't know, what rhymes with your name that you like?
Party.
I had a party with crafty. And then in the next battle that you're in, and the other person uses, I had a party and there was crafty, then, it's not like that belonged to the other person because they used it first, even in the same context. Like, so it's like we put weight on the best rhymes and say like, well, they get sort of consecrated up in this sort of top right hand corner that you can't touch, where it's like these are the best rhymes ever, and they've been used once, and that's their live by date, and you can listen to them again, but you can't use them. But there are some that can be used 1,000 times and never run out.
Yeah, it's surely subjective. It's like a poetry cliche is the moon, writing about the moon, using the moon as a metaphor. But there'll be a couple examples that are just incredibly famous. A particular simile that's been made, and you go, you can't say that. Like Dickinson said that.
Right.
You can't just use the same thing, and they might not have heard that, or they might have, or who actually. How many times do you hear a bar said by a rapper that was said at an event that rapper was at, and they heard it and they forgot they'd heard it, and then
of course,
idea. It happens. We've all probably done it to maybe different sort of degrees, using a little rhyme or a little wordplay or something. It's a difficult one. I think the way you do it and compiling them into these sets, no one's doing that. So you can say, this is my little set of rhymes that I've made. It's a set of 8 rhymes that I've put together. I think you could almost guarantee that those set of 8 rhymes haven't just been paired off and published like that before. Like, it doesn't mean other people can't use them, or make a piece of creative writing using some of them. I again, in my personal view, I think looking at someone's list of rhymes or someone that given to you and making punchlines out of them, I think is cheating. Yeah, I think it's cheating. And I know that's why you market the book as, look, you're meant to right your wrong. You're meant to look at this. No, I can do other ones, and I can make. It's
a tool to promote your own. Like, maybe take 1 or 2 if you're like. But like, this is the thing, isn't it? It's like if you if you're struggling and you go through it and you're like, oh, that's the perfect word, like you're not going to find a better word. So then you might use it, but then you also sort of like use it in order to get better at writing. Like, again, yeah, exactly. The idea is not to lift and place, cut and paste. But
and I think the important thing is we're in that process now and thinking about these things. And, you know, in a decade time, there'll be a lot more tangible material, or dare I say academic material. This will be used academically, these books and dictionaries and pieces of writing and essays to go, we now have descriptions. It's now kind of published. And that doesn't mean they're the only description, but even little words you use, I've heard you use little arrow rhymes, and you've made little words for different types, because that needs to exist for the
exactly. That's what I think. Yeah,
to exist. So it's a lot of these intricacies that we're talking about. They're conversations that me and you have, the other, you know, people listening, and, you know, Theo and it makes you write with, are all having, and it just needs that block of, like, I don't know, is it something published? But I think there'll be a lot.
It just needs, like, validation is really, I guess, like the idea. It just needs to be like validated, and then put out there in an official way that people can go, oh, okay, this actually has more to it than maybe we assumed. Of like,
that's what excites me, that we're like some of the founding figures, I guess, of not say that arrogantly, of a new age academic movement, because the more of us are like trying to write this shit down, even people who are getting involved in your challenges, they are publishing work in a way. They're publishing ideas on the internet that are permanent. We're adding to this mass and this movement that I think in 10, 20 years might be much, much more commonly known about. But we're at the moment, it's kind of a niche. And I think that I'd almost guarantee that's going to happen. And that's what's quite exciting to me about this.
Yeah, 100%. Right, that's a pretty good place to leave it after I do my fucking the quiz. Quiz, which Crafty heard me do, because I forgot to do it until we got onto the thing, and then I spent half an hour actually doing it for your. But here we go. Okay,
so have a massive list of rhymes on you, so it doesn't take long.
Yeah, exactly. I just pick and choose, mate. It's easy. Piece of piss. Right, here we go. Right, 15 questions as per. Oh, and the winner of last week. Right, I forgot to mention this actually. I've got a few things to close on. One, today's hangover was brought to me by a lovely guy who I'm going to try and find now whilst I've got my thing open. But it was brought to us by a chap who reached out and said, you often seem hungover in your podcast. What do you drink? And I said, well, I drink this. And he said, what about cocktails? And I said, a Moscow Mule is the only cocktail I really like, and the only one I really know. And he sent me a bottle of it in something that said COVID-19 survival pack or something like that. And it was brilliant. So I'm just going to find his name now if I can. Oh God, where's he gone? The other thing I was going to say is that I got a message sent for last week by Ian Wood, who is the winner of last week's challenge. He got a 16 out of 16, so I'm giving him the win. And
big 16 out of 16.
Not bad, mate. It's not bloody bad.
Congrats, man.
And along with his answers, he sent about 3 minutes of a battle rap that he'd written against me, without my knowledge. But I wasn't included in it. I just got it there. And I opened it, and he started talking about how fat I was. All right? So I sent him one back, and I, for some reason, recorded myself. I recorded my screen writing it for some reason, so I could show him that I wasn't spending too much time on it, because I don't want people to think I'm like, I do this to everyone. So I wrote back, and I sent him a diss back, and it was a funny little moment, because I don't know, it was just a weird moment to wait. I was literally just on my phone. I opened it like that, and then I started to press play. He's like, "Yo, you've been gaining weight," and I was like, "What the fuck is this? Who's this cunt?" And I had to go, yeah, but it was quite funny. And so yeah, you win, mate. You win
the context, man. Right.
You win. He wins. He's taking it. But here we go. Oh, I'm really trying to find this guy who sent me the thing. This is frustrating. And And then I'm going to go through this week's challenge because it is a bloody good one. And this is just me filling time until I find... Oh, here we go. Waterboy. Right. So he's got an online menu and it is called... oh, no. Right. If you want... bloody, what are they called? Cocktails sent to you from a really good pub that makes amazing cocktails, then get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with him. All right? Because I can't find the name. So don't have a go at me because I've done nothing wrong. I've also done nothing
open the
at
next
all.
podcast with the name of it, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do that. It'll be a nice little treat.
Yeah.
But it was brilliant. Hashtag ad. Right. Okay, here we go. So the rhyming quiz. Right. Episode 12. Or series 3, oh, I don't know, whatever the fuck we are on. Right, okay, Corbyn Army is number 1. Corbyn Army, and the clue is austerity. Bit political for your ass. Bit political. The next one is 2 is non-compliance. Non-compliance, and the clue is British place. So, yeah, it's a British place in Britain. All right, but it's kind of tricky. All right, number 3 is Dolly Parton. Famous country music singer Dolly Parton, and the clue is London. All right. Next one is Gold Dust, as in the wrestler, and also the thing, and the clue is stationery. I'm not even going to tell you which type of stationery. You just have to figure that out. All right, it's difficult. Number 5 is open goal, as in an open goal, and the clue is band, as in BAND. Then overactor is number 6, and the clue is overactor. Oh, I've mugged you off. I've done you again. I've done you with a double clue. Right, number 7, Nicholas Hoult. British national treasure, Nicholas Hoult, and the clue is freezing. Number 8 is infantile, and the clue is straight line. It's kind of tricky. You can get it. Number 9 is twisted ankle, and the clue is TV. I think we actually mentioned that today. Oh, well. And then number 10 is light and fluffy. And the clue is, it's a phrase. It's just a phrase. That is the clue. Is that the answer? Is a phrase. And that's light and fluffy. All right. 11 is side counters. And the clue is rain forecast. And then number 12 is Bryan Singer, the director. And the clue is, in auctions, I'm the winner. All right. So a rhyming clue for your ass. Number 13, I just realised I've got Excel up to do this, and I just realised that Crafty must be sitting there really politely, just waiting like that.
I'm trying to think of them as well. No, it's all good.
Guy Ritchie is number 13, and the clue is cereal. Number 14 is burst tyre, and the clue is hymn sheet. And number 15 is breast reduction, and the double clue for 15 is Twilight and Formula 1. And that's the lot. That's your lot. All right. Any final words, Craft? Danny Pandolfi?
Yeah, just no, big up Shuffle. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks, man.
You know, I love talking about rhyme.
Yeah, man.
Rap, anything like that. So much appreciated, and big up to all your what are your fan base called?
Shufflets.
The Shufflets. Big up the Shufflets.
Big up the Shufflets, mate. All right, thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on. I'll catch you soon. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone at home. Have a good one.